Revenge with Karen.
I'm cutting your access, Chase Darnell said, flipping through his notes like a toddler, pretending to read War and Peace. I was halfway through updating a certificate vault when he dropped that turd on the conference table. His smile said team player, but his eyes were all coked up ambition and linked in dopamine. He didn't even look up when he did it, just tossed the words out there like they were leftovers. As part of role consolidation, streamlining legacy privileges. Legacy, huh? Cute. That's what he called 14 years of bleeding into this infrastructure, legacy. The room was fake quiet. You know the type. That sterile, carpeted hush of corporate violence when everyone's lips are pursed, but their eyes are sprinting for the exits. CFO kept scrolling. The general counsel blinked too slowly. And Chase, our newly minted VP of product with a jawline that probably has its own HR rep, kept talking about efficiency and right-sizing and how my contributions were historically valuable. Historically. Like I was a damn Mayan ruin he'd stumbled across while building a resort. I didn't speak, didn't flinch. Just calmly reached over and closed my laptop. Not like I could use it much longer. I glanced at the time, 11:42 a.m., and made a mental note to update my folder. The one nobody knew about, one titled Let Them Find Out. Every system I'd built, every auth string, every permission level, every contingency key, including the protocol for escrow release, tied to one name nobody but I remembered. K. Rivera, my father's name. A detail so small, so irrelevant, that it had slipped through every ego in the room. Side note, if you're enjoying this little corporate thriller and want more stories where karma shows up in a server log, do us a solid. Hit that like button and subscribe. Apparently 93% of y'all listen without subscribing, and the team's starting to think we're just yelling into a Zoom void. Show us you're out there. It keeps the stories coming and Chase sweating. Anyway, I left the meeting in silence. Not even a paper rustled behind me. My badge still worked for now. So I rode the elevator alone, past the break room where some intern was nuking salmon, because of course, walked straight into the server room one floor down. No one followed. No one dared. They'd written me off before I even stood up. Chase had declared it done, my access revoked by end of day. He didn't ask how anything worked, didn't check the dependency map, didn't consult the infrastructure matrix. Hell, the man probably thinks SSH is a gender reveal theme. He just strutted into that boardroom with his blazer and buzzwords, eager to make a splash. And me was the easy target, the legacy risk, the woman whose code didn't show up in slide decks or investor calls. But the thing about being invisible for so long is that you learn to plant your roots deep, deep enough that if someone tries to rip you out too fast, they take the whole foundation with them. At 1:03 p.m., I got the auto notification, access modification scheduled. The timestamp pulsed on my screen like a heartbeat. One by one, admin privileges began disappearing. Vaults, certificates, key rotation schedules, but one didn't. One key stayed dormant like a ghost in the walls, untouched, unbothered, because Chase didn't know it existed. No one did. That night, I poured myself a whiskey neat, sat by the window, and watched the building flicker through its automated shutdown routine. Floors dimming one by one like a sinking ship. The office was prepping for its big acquisition, $200 million merger with a Dutch fintech. A buyout that hinged on system continuity, escrow integrity, and the confidence of the buyer's compliance team. Systems I built, protocols I owned, they just didn't know how much yet. The escrow protocol started on a napkin. Not even kidding. 7 years ago, during an after-hours panic over a failed transaction rollback, I stayed behind with one junior dev, a vending machine burrito, and a Sharpie that smelled like death. While the rest of the team argued about liability clauses and compliance frameworks, I mapped out a secure multi-stage validation sequence using redundant certificate chains, one that couldn't be spoofed, backdoored, or dumbed down for a flashy demo. At the time, no one cared. I didn't have a title. I wasn't strategic. I was just Joyce from Systems, quiet one who fixed things and didn't make a fuss when everyone else went home. But I knew what we needed. A clean, tamper-proof release mechanism for large-scale escrow payouts, backed by verifiable audit trails and encrypted through a personal key registry. Every release had to pass 3 stages: system hash, validator clearance, and private key authentication. If any stage failed, the transfer locked. No override, no skip. Just a full halt, till a registered fallback authority signed off. And guess who that fallback was? K. Rivera, my father's name. Kelvin, Vietnam vet, taught me to solder when I was 8, taught me to shut up and listen when I wanted to scream. The name wasn't for show, it was my little signature buried in the bones of the system. Nobody ever questioned it because nobody ever bothered to read that deep into the architecture. It worked, flawlessly, for years. And because it worked, faded into the background like everything else I did. Fast forward to now, Chase struts in with his fresh vision and decides to yank out the keystone from the arch without asking what it holds up. He doesn't even ask if the system requires a fallback identity. Doesn't even know that buried 3 layers deep in the validator logic is a reference string that still says, auth fallback equals K Rivera. I reopened the archive that night, not out of vengeance. Just habit. Control. I needed to see that it was still there. Every line of code, every commit hash, every private key rotation log and timestamped cert authority, clean, airtight, unmodified. I started compiling it. Quietly, deliberately. A single folder on an encrypted drive titled, with absolute petness, let them find out. Inside it, full specs of the escrow validator schema, key lifecycle documentation, fallback chain logs, original Slack messages recommending formal documentation, ignored of course, and screenshots, lots of them, from old admin dashboards bearing my name beside the words key custodian, K. Rivera. Chase thought revoking my access would be a clean break. He didn't realize he'd just left the building's mainframe without a skeleton key, and I wasn't about to hand him a map. For the next 3 days, I watched from the shadows. Emails pinged. Access requests flew. Transition teams started prepping documentation for the buyer's compliance audit, and I saw my name disappear from every draft, every reference, like I'd never existed. My inbox, silent. Nobody asked me to review anything. Nobody requested legacy insights. Chase handed the escrow module off to an engineer I hadn't seen since the Christmas party, a guy who once forgot his GitHub password while screen sharing with the CTO. Had no idea what they were holding or what they were about to drop. I went back to my notes, added timestamps, cross-referenced my audit trails, triple-checked the digital fingerprint of every certificate tied to the release function. My fingerprints were everywhere, encrypted into every transaction relay, every failsafe, every validator callback. The whole damn thing hummed with my code like a heartbeat under the floorboards. Nobody noticed, and I didn't remind them, because when you build the invisible layer, you don't need to raise your voice. You just wait for the moment they try to walk across it, and fall straight through. The Monday before the big transition meeting, Chase strutted through the office like he'd just discovered escrow protocols himself, smiling that smug, cologne-soaked smile reserved for men who confuse charisma with competence. "We're locked and loaded," he told the CEO, clapping him on the back like they were frat brothers instead of 2 grown men orchestrating a $200 million acquisition. "Compliance materials are squared away, tech stacks prepped, buyer sign-off will be a breeze." I was 3 desks away, sipping bitter breakroom coffee, watching his reflection in the glass partition. His posture screamed victory. His voice was loud enough for the interns to hear. His timeline? Fantasy. Didn't mention the failed validation pings we'd gotten over the weekend. He didn't mention the fallback authority logs throwing warning flags. He certainly didn't mention that nobody, including himself, had credentials to authorize final escrow release without the K. Rivera chain. That was all under the hood. Deep, quiet, important. In other words, completely invisible to Chase. By lunchtime, I got my official exclusion memo. For clarity and transition efficiency, read, "Your presence will not be required in the buyer alignment sessions." It was signed by Chase and approved by Executive Ops. Attached was a transition document scrubbed of my name like I'd never written a line of code in my life. I scrolled through it once. No mention of the key registry. No fallback documentation. No certificate authority chart. Instead, I saw a bulleted list of handoff items that read like someone skimmed a Wikipedia article on fintech compliance and tried to bluff their way through a polygraph. The best part? They handed off my entire system to Jonah. Jonah, fresh out of a boot camp, still clicking run to test if things compile. This was the same guy who once asked if JSON was a person. The one who thought Git was optional if you trust your code. One whose Slack profile said Code Ninja unironically. Chase plopped a thick transition binder on his desk and said, "You'll be point on the escrow infrastructure. Let me know if you hit any snags." Jonah blinked like someone handed him a baby and said, "Keep it alive." I just stared, One long, amused exhale. No words, just the kind of smirk that floats up when you realize someone's building a time bomb, thinking it's a throne. Spent the next day rehearsing for the buyer call. A mock Q&A with the CTO, the legal team, and someone from investor relations who pronounced infrastructure like she was ordering sushi. I watched through the glass like it was a zoo exhibit. Chase pacing, reciting buzzwords like he was pitching on Shark Tank. Jonah nodding with a face that screamed, "Please, don't ask me anything specific." And the CEO sipping from a mug that said "World's Best Strategist." Around 4 p.m., I got an email from Chase's assistant, just confirming you won't be attending tomorrow's compliance sync. I replied with one word, "Correct." Then I shut my laptop, packed up my charger, and left 20 minutes early for the first time in 3 years. Walking out of that office felt like watching someone light a firework backwards. Everyone smiling, clapping, waiting for the show, totally unaware they were standing on the launchpad. It erased my name from every document, every credit, every version history they thought mattered. But the system didn't care about names. It cared about credentials. It cared about keys. And no matter how much Chase tried to play king, he couldn't crown himself custodian of a kingdom he didn't know how to enter. Let the boy have his parade. I'd built the rails. I knew where they ended. The first ping came at 2:08 a.m. I was awake. I'm always awake these days. Not insomnia, not anxiety. Just years of running back-end operations that taught my body clock to twitch at the faintest vibration. The alert slid across my screen with the chill subtlety of a ghost dragging a nail down drywall. Alert key validation attempt failed IP. External protocol. Escrow transfer stage 3 routine on paper. Except nothing about that timing was routine. No internal batch jobs ran that late. No certificate updates were scheduled. Nobody should have been touching the escrow sequence, not unless someone had prematurely started the buyer handoff procedures. Which meant one thing, they were testing the system, without the system's architect. I stared at the alert for a long moment, then closed the lid of my laptop. I didn't log in, didn't debug, didn't even check the originating IP. Why bother? I already knew what was coming. You can't breathe life into something that's built to suffocate intruders. Third stage validator is a deadbolt with no mercy. It doesn't ask questions, it just slams shut if you don't have the right key. And there's only one key, the one tied to K. Rivera. At 4:45 a.m., the second ping came in louder this time. Not literally, of course, but it might as well have been a scream in Morse code. Error escrow access denied key authority not found. There it was. The red flag. The cold verdict, digital equivalent of a vault door slamming shut while someone's hand is still inside. I didn't jump up. I didn't panic. I didn't grab my phone to call anyone or rush to log into Slack like some adrenaline junkie trying to rescue a server farm from itself. Instead, I padded barefoot into the kitchen, flicked on the stove light, and brewed coffee. The percolator hissed its slow, deeming lullaby while the city outside remained dark and dumb to the fact that somewhere in an overpriced glass box, a $200 million deal was quietly coding itself into purgatory. My phone buzzed on the counter. A string of silent notifications stacked on the lock screen, system logs, failure notices, retry attempts. The engineers were scrambling. Buyers' IPs were bouncing off a firewall I designed to treat all unverified parties like cybercriminals. Someone had probably just said, "Maybe try again," and hit the button with the desperation of a kid resetting a crashed game console. I didn't reply. Instead, I stirred my coffee, opened my kitchen window, and let the early September air sweep through the screen like a blessing. The air smelled like cut grass and dying heat, the kind of scent that reminds you summer's over whether you're ready or not. Fitting. By the time the sky started bleeding pink, I could feel the panic from miles away. Some poor compliance analyst was probably sweating through a dress shirt, praying to whatever gods control certificate chains. Legal was drafting blame shift memos. Chase was either asleep or still wide awake, pacing in front of a laptop he didn't know how to navigate, wondering why the system he had under control suddenly refused to obey. And somewhere, a Dutch buyer was starting their morning in Amsterdam, sipping espresso, opening their compliance checklist, and seeing a red box instead of a green one. That's the kind of red that stains, the kind that costs millions, the kind that asks questions like, who designed this system? Why isn't their name in the binder? Why is there a fallback identity we can't verify? I took another sip. leaned against the counter, and smiled. The silence before the storm isn't really silence. It's the sound of hubris dissolving in real time, of bluff meeting reality, of men like Chase finally realizing that control isn't declared, it's coded. And he just walked straight into a vault with no map, no key, and no clue whose name was carved into the steel. Let them scramble. Let them call. I wasn't ignoring the system alerts because I didn't care. I was letting the silence ring long enough for them to finally hear it. At 6:07 a.m., a single line of text detonated inside a dozen inboxes. Subject, urgent, escrow verification failure body. We are unable to verify stage 3 escrow key authority. System logs reference K. Rivera as fallback validator. Please advise, who is K. Rivera? No emojis. No exclamation points. Just those last 5 words, surgical, unforgiving, radioactive. Somewhere in Amsterdam, the buyer's compliance director was already on her second espresso, cross-referencing every name on the personnel transition list with the system logs. And there it was, the ghost signature. K. Rivera, a name no one had bothered to ask about, a name scrubbed from all the prep decks, a name with no LinkedIn profile, no org chart position, no cute introductory slide labeled Meet Our Team, just a name. Mine, buried like a landmine no one thought to disarm. At that exact moment, I was 6 blocks away from the office, walking my usual morning route past a bakery that always smelled like burnt sugar and regret. My phone buzzed once, then again, again. I didn't look. I turned off previews last year when Chase first got hired and started peppering staff with urgent pings that read like Mad Libs from a project manager's fever dream. Messages were coming fast now. I could feel the panic in the vibrations, short bursts, long pings, group threads lighting up like a Christmas tree wired wrong. I let it buzz itself breathless in my coat pocket and focused instead on the click of my boots against the sidewalk. Crisp, steady, in rhythm with the unraveling behind me. Back in the office, legal was already in a group call by 6:15. One partner had pulled out the old dev contracts. Another was flipping through archived JIRA tickets looking for anything, with my name or signature that could explain who this phantom keyholder was. The general counsel asked IT to trace the validator ID. Its answer, we don't know who K. Rivera is. Of course they didn't, because K. Rivera wasn't a name you looked up in the employee directory. It wasn't listed in payroll or on any holiday party RSVP. It was the fingerprint left behind when no one else wanted to own the responsibility, when I needed to build something airtight and personal and trusted enough that I'd bet my father's name on it. And now, that bet was coming due. The board call started early. Emergency status. Chase joined late, hair a mess, voice cracked, hiding behind his laptop camera like a man who just realized the vault door he kicked down was load-bearing. What's the issue? He asked. Silence. The CEO, we've got a systems lock. Escrow fallback is triggering a name we can't verify. A voice from the buyer's side, calm, clinical. We need to know who holds the K. Rivera credential. Otherwise, we cannot proceed. Period. That's when my name came up for the first time, not from Chase, not from legal, but from one of the junior engineers. The same one who'd been assigned to handle handoff items and hadn't even known what a secure shell was. Said it quiet like a confession. I think Joyce might have set that up, a long time ago. I saw a doc once it mentioned Rivera. The silence after that wasn't just awkward, it was fatal. Back on my walk, I paused at a crosswalk and finally checked my phone. 18 missed calls. A Slack message from the CEO marked urgent, 3 from legal, 1 from the buyer's team lead. I scrolled past them all and opened my music app instead. Something ambient, a little dramatic, something with strings. Across town, a multimillion-dollar acquisition was bleeding into open air because they'd built an entire transition plan around a fantasy, one where the system didn't care who made it, only that it was pretty for the pitch deck. Now they were being reminded gently, but unmistakably, that systems don't answer to job titles. They answer to keys, and I was holding the only one. By 7:15 a.m., the emergency board call was live. Cameras on, eyes loosened. One executive clearly hadn't even made it home from the night before, suit jacket draped over a chair, dress shirt open at the collar like someone just served him divorce papers, and a subpoena in the same envelope. The buyer's side was already on the line, staring with the kind of polite contempt that only Europeans can pull off while sipping tea and holding your financial future hostage. Compliance leads. legal reps, one person whose job title just said principal oversight, whatever the hell that meant, but who looked like she'd already filed 3 reports and sharpened the blade. The question landed like a hammer through glass. Who built the current escrow system? The CEO hesitated, blinking like someone just asked him to explain cold fusion. Legal glanced sideways, unsure if it was a rhetorical question or a trap. The CTO hadn't written a line of code since dial-up, cleared his throat but said nothing. Even Chase, all puffed chest and cologne sweat panic, couldn't muster a full sentence. Then quietly, almost apologetically, came the answer. From a compliance analyst buried in the corner square of the Zoom grid. Probably someone who still drank office coffee without complaining. Joyce Rivera, he muttered. She built the original validator stack. The whole escrow flow, years ago. Boom. Just like that. Silence. Thick, sharp around the edges. The kind of silence that cuts through budget padding, PowerPoint slides, and every bullshit leadership book Chase had ever skimmed for talking points. The CEO turned slowly toward Chase. Not literally, he was still staring into a webcam, but the energy shifted like the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. Is that true? He asked, voice tight. Chase looked like someone had just pulled the emergency brake on his entire career. He opened his mouth, closed it, reopened it like rebooting a frozen laptop. She wasn't listed in the transition documentation. I was told she wasn't critical to the handoff. Who told you that? Legal asked. Chase blinked, swallowed, didn't answer. We need her, the buyer's compliance lead said. Not a suggestion. A verdict. That's when legal did something unusual. They overrode the chain of command. We're adding Joyce to this call, one of the senior partners said, right now. Chase tried to object. She's no longer, she's the fallback key authority, legal snapped. She is the system. My phone rang at 7:26 a.m. I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail while I tied my shoes. They sent a Zoom invite 2 minutes later. I clicked it. Joined with no video. No mic. Just a black screen labeled J. Rivera. Like a ghost signal pulsing into their neat little grid of blinking faces and crumbling assumptions. Nobody spoke for a full 6 seconds. I could see Chase staring at my square like it was a poltergeist come to drag him into a system architecture diagram and devour him pixel by pixel. The buyer's lead leaned in slightly, her expression unreadable but interested. Finally, the CEO spoke. Joyce, can you confirm whether you built the current escrow protocol? I didn't answer, not yet. Just let the question sit there, echoing. Let the weight of their oversight wrap its arms around their necks and squeeze. Because sometimes silence is louder than outrage. Sometimes it's not the scream that lands, it's the stillness right before the dam breaks. They'd cut me out, scrubbed my name, replaced me with someone who thought Python was a type of malware. And now, needed the ghost in their machine to materialize and save them. I clicked the mute icon, took a slow breath, and smiled, just barely, into the microphone I hadn't turned on yet. Because the truth wasn't just that I could fix this. It was that I built this. And now they finally remembered. At 7:48 a.m., with the board call still ongoing and silence choking the line like secondhand smoke, I unmuted for the first time. Check your inbox, I said. 3 words, that's all. I didn't wait for a response. Didn't explain, didn't posture. Just dropped the digital equivalent of a surgical blade into the middle of their crisis table and let it sit there, cold, gleaming, precise. The PDF was titled simply, Reinstatement Terms J. Rivera PDF. I'd written it the night before. Not out of arrogance, not for revenge, but because I knew the second Chase cut my access, that they'd come crawling back. Maybe not immediately, maybe not even before it burned a little. But systems don't forget their architects. They just hold their breath until someone asks the right question. Clause 1 was clear. Full systems access restored, including administrative vault credentials, deployment pipelines, and audit logs. No alterations permitted without written approval. Clause 2 followed, effective immediately. Chase Darnell will relinquish all technical oversight roles related to system architecture, escrow validation, infrastructure management, and compliance reporting. He may retain his title, but not the keys. Clause 3 was simple, brutal truth. A permanent record shall be entered into board governance minutes documenting authorship of the escrow system by Joyce Rivera, including fallback architecture, validator logic, and key security chains. There was no fluff, no passive-aggressive jabs, no emotional manipulation. Just terms, legal terms, terms that clarified I wasn't asking, I was offering. Across the call, papers shuffled. Keyboards clicked. I imagined Chase reading the clauses with the same expression someone wears when they find out their name's been removed from a deed, a will, and the group chat simultaneously. The buyer's lead counsel was the first to speak. These terms seem reasonable. That was the kill shot. Not a debate, not a rebuttal. Just professional recognition that the person they'd erased was now the only adult in the room. The escrow system couldn't be validated without me, and I wasn't about to do it without making sure my name was finally, irrevocably, undeletable. The CEO sighed. Joyce, can we agree to these terms? I let the question hang for a moment. Power lives in the pause. Add a line to Clause 3, I said, language stating that removal of system authorship without documented transfer constitutes a breach of internal controls. More clicking. The lawyer added it. Resentment wafted through the call like steam from a busted radiator. And one more thing, I said. Chase groaned, of course. Don't interrupt, the CFO cut in. Cold, controlled. She wasn't defending me, just tired of watching a $200 million deal wobble because of one man's ego wrapped in startup jargon. The terms were updated, finalized, executed digitally with e-signatures and a timestamp. 7:59 a.m. Joyce Rivera, reinstated, not with a badge, not with a speech, but with full vault access, oversight, and the kind of digital leash that lets you tug an entire company back from the brink or drop it into the abyss. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just opened the terminal, refreshed the dashboard, and watched the access lights turn green one by one. Chase was still in the call, still breathing heavy, still pretending he had any cards left. But the game was over, and I wasn't playing anymore. I was writing the rulebook. By 8:17 a.m., the buyer's team had been fully briefed. Legal laid it out clinically, like reading aloud a medical chart for a patient in critical condition. Escrow protocol failed stage 3 validation. Fallback authority signature required. Validation contingent on original architect's direct action. No sugarcoating, no hedging. Just the raw, surgical truth. They had a system no one could open and a deal worth $200 million hanging on one person's login. The buyer's lead nodded. We'll hold, she said. But the system must be validated by Joyce Rivera. Personally. No substitutes. No proxies. Across the call, you could hear the collective exhale of a boardroom that had spent the last 2 hours choking on its own confidence. At 8:24 a.m., the CEO sent the final countersigned reinstatement letter. No ceremony, just a PDF and a 5-word email. Thank you. Please proceed accordingly. I read it once, twice, then forwarded it to my private archive, timestamped, indexed, labeled under Resurrection Protocol because yes, name my folders like movie scripts, sue me. In the main conference room, they'd gathered like parishioners before a reluctant priest. Chase sat with his tie loosened, lips pressed into a pale, flat line that used to be a smirk. The CIO avoided eye contact. Legal sat ramrod straight, ready to document every breath. And the CFO, she'd moved from mild irritation to full-blown financial war goddess. I don't think this is necessary, Chase started. CFO cut in like a guillotine. You nearly lost us $200 million because you couldn't Google who built our dam system. Sit down, he did. Faster than anyone expected, I logged in. Terminal opened clean. Access restored as negotiated. My cursor blinked against the black background, waiting like a dog at heel. I navigated to the validator sequence, deep beneath the surface. Only 3 people had ever seen the raw code, and 2 of them had since moved to startups that burned out within a year. There it was. My ghost code, clean, untouched, the final line waiting for authentication. I typed, execute escrow validation, auth equals K Rivera, confirm equals true. The screen paused, then blinked. Status, validated stage 3, past transfer window, authorized green. Glorious. Unforgiving. I heard it over speakerphone. Buyer's team murmuring confirmation. Compliance noting the timestamp. The legal rep nodding, we're clear to proceed. You could practically hear the relief leaking out of Chase's pores like cold sweat under fluorescent lights. Thank you, Joyce, the CEO said, voice measured. Sincerely. You're welcome, I replied without emotion. Civility perfectly pressed and ironed. Because that's the thing about competence, real competence. It doesn't shout. It doesn't swagger. Doesn't need to parade around in tailored suits making people fetch coffee while pretending to be building empires. It logs in, runs one line of code, and saves your ass while you're still trying to figure out where the power button is. They watched the terminal like it was some kind of oracle. Like maybe, if they stared long enough, It'd spit out forgiveness too, but I don't code forgiveness. I code certainty. Chase didn't come back after lunch. Security met him at the elevator, HR in tow, clipboard in hand, that tight corporate smile that always means this isn't personal, but we've already deleted your badge profile. He protested, of course, mumbled something about overreach and political targeting, like he hadn't spent the last week LAR ping as king of a castle he didn't know had a basement full of dynamite. But nobody argued. Nobody stopped the elevator. No teary send-off, just a soft ding as the doors closed and a career exited stage left, dragging a trail of buzzwords and burnt bridges. At 1:03 p.m., I walked into the boardroom, not virtually, not muted, in person. The room fell quiet. The same people who'd watched Chase gut my access now avoided my eyes like they were looking directly into a system log of their own failure. The buyer's team had already left. Their signature was drying on the digital paperwork. $200 million transfer was set in motion, thanks to one green light and one ghost in the machine finally stepping into daylight. The CEO stood, gesture of respect. Maybe just fear. Joyce, he said, we'd like to discuss making this permanent. I said nothing. He motioned to the legal counsel beside him, who slid a folder forward. Inside, a revised offer. Base salary bumped. Role upgraded to Chief Systems Architect, oversight authority across all tech verticals. But the line that mattered was at the bottom. Equity, 2.5% vested immediately with performance bump triggers. Not stock options, not incentives, ownership. He cleared his throat. You've more than earned this. We'd like to ensure your contributions are never overlooked again. I looked around the room. These were the same people who'd watched me get sidelined without so much as a raised eyebrow, stayed quiet when Chase branded my work legacy and stripped me of access like I was a threat instead of the foundation. But now they were offering me a seat at the table. I tapped the folder once. Calm, measured. Then I said, K. Rivera accepts. The CFO smiled, not politely, not diplomatically. Genuinely. She was the only one in the room who hadn't flinched when I came back from digital exile, holding the system in my hands like a scalpel. She nodded once. Respect exchanged, no more words needed. I left the boardroom without another glance. Down the hall, past the wall of headshots I'd never been invited to join. Past Chase's office, now dark, a monitor still blinking with the failed transfer attempts from that early morning scramble. Down the stairs instead of the elevator. I always trusted steel more than software. I walked into the server room alone. The hum was still there, low and steady. Sound of continuity, of uptime, of systems doing what they're told because someone once cared enough to make them honest. I stepped up to the terminal, logged in with the reinstated keychain. The cursor blinked, waiting. I typed, #reset authority keys enter. New protocols, new logs, no ghosts this time. Only my name, not revenge, not even triumph, just correction. Because I didn't want to burn the system down. I wanted to make damn sure that next time someone like Chase tried to rewrite history, the system would whisper back, access denied. Authorship confirmed. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.